Hello, BookTube. Welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin. I'm doing my January 2021 monthly wrap-up. I got through 3 older history books. All of them pretty short, pretty thin. At the same time, I haven't finished this yet, but I've been reading Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa. It's almost 1,000 pages, and I'm a good length of the way through it. I'm gonna finish it within a fairly short amount of time, definitely for next month, and I hope to read some other stuff on Japanese history during that time. But this month was dedicated to getting to books that I've had sitting on my shelf for a long time that had to deal with mostly Dark Age history, and that are also older history books. I will talk about them in the order in which I read them. So the first book I read was The Warrior Kings of Saxon England by Ralph Whitlock. I believe this was originally written in the 70s. This edition happens to be from 1991, part of a series. They'd also published 1066, The Year of Conquest, which by David Howarth, which I had read years ago, and I really enjoyed it. And this is just a nice, quick, general history of Saxon England, Dark Age England, told from the perspective of the kings and focusing on their military conquests. So you've got everything from Egbert to really Edmund Ironside, and with an especially longer focus on King Alfred, which is fitting, I would say. This was a very fine, very nice telling, very swift telling. I believe that Ralph Whitlock was kind of a respected local historian in southern England, and he does a pretty good job. I mean, I did have some issues with it. There is a very heavy bias towards Christianity in this, to the point where, pre-Christian Saxons, and anybody who's not Christian, whether they're pagan or Muslim, they're generally spoken of with far different adjectives than he reserves for the Christians. Things like savages and barbarians and everything else. This is certainly from a very Christian perspective. Even Charlemagne, when he massacres basically about 4,500 Saxons, he kind of gets a pass. This is, he talks about that happening after kind of glowingly discussing Charlemagne, and the things that he talks about the pagans doing don't go anywhere near what Charlemagne did in savagery and in scale, but Charlemagne does not get the same kind of treatment as those others. So it's a very skewed treatment. I mean, this was fine. I wish that there were more maps. I'm only vaguely familiar with English geography. I have not been to England yet, so he talks a lot of he references a lot of things like north of this town, south of that town, and unfortunately, there's really nothing in the way of maps. There is a map at the very beginning. That's it. That's the one that you have. So it would have been helpful to have more images and maps along the way. Otherwise, I'm glad that I read it as a quick survey. It was perfectly fine. The next thing I read was originally from the 60s. This is the Penguin Classics version of the Vinland Sagas, the Norse discovery of America. There is a newer edition that Penguin has put out with a different translation, different introductions. So this is definitely old. It is outdated. Some of the language used in the introduction, especially to describe Native Americans, would not pass muster today. They are referred to in a way that I believe is a British way of distinguishing Native Americans from people from India. But today it would be completely considered a pejorative. It would just be an absolute insult. So I'm not going to repeat it here. This was written in 1960 by somebody who I believe was British, but maybe of I think Icelandic descent, possibly. But it is very interesting. The Icelandic sagas are two different sagas. You have the Greenland saga and you have Eric's saga. Generally, the Greenland saga is considered to be the older one. Also, maybe a little more reliable. It certainly feels that way. Eric's saga feels like a lot of time has passed to create legends and myths far more. It's also, there are things in there that are far more difficult to believe. Like Leif Erikson was sent by, I think, the King of Norway to go and Christianize all of Greenland. I mean, there's no evidence for anything like that. But these were absolutely fun. You know, you have these Norse settlers coming through, and so much of it is very matter of fact. Like, so and so did this, they found this. But then mixed in are these great moments of like supernatural horror. You have like people who die that all of a sudden like sit up again, and they're talking, they're declaring almost prophecies. There's at one point where they're in Vinland, just a mysterious woman. She seems to be like a Norse woman, even though that wouldn't make sense because they are in the Americas. Just this mysterious woman just kind of shows up and asks to be let in, and all of a sudden she disappears. So there's just these weird supernatural elements that are peppered in that just make for terrific reading. I do want to get my hands on the newer edition. This one, again, this has been on my shelf for a long time. That I'm kind of ashamed it took me this long to get to, especially because it is such a quick read. But I will get the new one eventually. And the last one that I finished reading, and I just finished it recently, is Everyday Life of the Barbarians, Goths, Franks, and Vandals by Malcolm Todd. Yeah, I got this at a library book sale at one point. You know, right up my alley. Definitely a major interest of mine. I have to say the cover and the title don't inspire a ton of interest, but man, this was actually really impressive. It's part of a series. Everyday Life, you can see some of the other selections on there. And this was published in the early 70s, I think 71 or 72, 1972. Dorset Publishing, the same one that did the Saxon book. Now, a lot of the stuff is outdated. You know, so much has been learned since then. So just as far as information goes, there's some great stuff in here. You know, you gotta take it with a grain of salt and realize that things might have advanced. And there's a couple instances of that, especially with religion. At one point, he mentions that Odin was the son of Woden, which sounds like, you know, that might come from kind of a 19th century Christianization of Norse mythology. Odin and Woden were the same person. He also mentions that runes were used for divination, which I don't believe is actually true. I think that's actually more of like a 19th century invention. Runes they had magical properties, but like casting runes and using them to divine the future and anything like that is not necessarily true. No evidence for that. As far as my understanding goes, if people know better, you can always leave a comment and correct me. But the real thing that I actually really loved about this are the illustrations by Eva Wilson. Hopefully I'm saying her name correctly. She has had books of designs that she's done, like historical designs that I'd like to get a hold of. But her illustrations are just so good in this. Should I find another example? It's peppered with these things. Here's things on sword construction. This book goes into all sorts of detail about their lives. Like, look at this. This is a chieftain's helmet. Just terrific illustrations here. And there are also, it's not just illustrations. I mean, there are also photos, although they're black and white photos, but they are stellar. See if I can find another really impressive one here. I mean, this, you can see just a combination of the two here. Here you have one of the Bogmen photograph, and then you have Eva Wilson's illustrations there. Just wonderful. And here's some of this is an illustration, it's a photo, but you can see some of the details of the artwork. So the chapters here, you can see the table of contents, what it goes into. You've got the world of the early Germans, the structure of society, the settlements of the land, the Germans at home, weapons and warfare, religious life, death and burial, the craftsmen. You know, aside from a few things that I'm suspicious of, as far as you know, our knowledge having grown, I thought this was still a great read. And again, the real joy for me in this was were the illustrations. I just think that they're stellar. I mean, they even go into how their towns were organized. So a wonderful amount of information on this. So yeah, once again, what I read here. The Warrior Kings of Saxon England, the Vinland Sagas, Norse Discovery of America, and Everyday Life of the Barbarians. You know, it was a fun month going through some Dark Age history. And next month, like I said, I'm going to dive a little bit into Japan and get to some other things. I don't think I'm going to entirely leave the Middle Ages behind. But we'll see. All right. See you next video. Thank you.